Hi, my name is Riley. I'm 15. Shh. Do you have many secrets? Has it ever happened that your whole life depends on your ability to keep your mouth shut? Watch the video to the end and find out how my father found out how much I was hiding from him and literally went off the rails with anger. Dad and I lived together. My mother died when I was very young, and I don't remember her. My dad is nice, but a little old-fashioned. No, he doesn't ride a horse or wear a top hat, but he's saying something out of date, like the values of my peers are wrong and we just sit in the phone, and it's very important to learn. But how else could he think? He's a teacher, and this is our secret. I go to the same school where he works. We agreed that at home we are a family, and at school we are a teacher and a student. And it makes him feel better, and no one will tease me with teacher's daughter. For some reason, everyone thinks that teachers' children get school grades for free. But believe me, this is not true. I study well, not because my dad is a teacher. I just work hard and I'm not completely stupid. And he's very proud of me. Most of all, I love history. But my best friend, Emmy, hates it. She says it's impossible to remember all these dates and stupid names. Emmy once asked me to do a paper on the Battle of Gettysburg for her. It's easy for me, but she's been suffering for the second week. So I did. She was so happy. She even gave me a ticket to the pool. Have you ever done one of the lessons for your classmates? Or maybe someone did your homework for you? Write it in the comments. Emmy told all her classmates that I could help with their study. She wanted to brag about how smart I was. But my classmates decided that they could ask me for help with difficult tasks, like a reference paper, then an essay, then a project. Easily, and a little more. And here I am, sitting with all these works until the morning and do not have time to do my lessons. If I start learning worse, my dad will be mad. He generally keeps me strict. Even my phone looks like it's from the last century, because my dad says that the phone is not a toy, but a means of communication. Everyone laughs when I take out my old brick. They ask what museum I stole it from. I tried to save money for a new one, but so far I haven't been able to. But at that moment, grades were more important. After all, the best students of the half year were soon to be named. I decided to work only for myself, and I managed not only to better my studies, but also to become the best student. The principal even shook my hand. Dad, that is our math teacher, already flushed with pleasure. The history teacher spoke about me separately. He said he'd be surprised if I didn't become a historian, and also released from the exam. What a reward! I was surprised and asked what I should do now, and he said that during the exam I could help him, hand out sheets of tasks and make sure that no one cheated. The questions on the exam were simple. I would have easily written them, but my classmates didn't seem to think so. They whispered together, trying to remember something. I didn't know what to do. It would be unfair to help my classmates, but it would be somehow disgusting not to help them. Dad always said that you should get your marks with your own mind, but he also taught me to help my friends. Emmy sat over her paper and almost cried. I realized that she didn't remember any dates. I made up my mind. While the teacher stood back, I showed everyone the important dates on my fingers. Wow! Our class passed the exam with amazing results. Even the school newspaper wrote about us. They said we were super cool historians, and all of us. The whole class was thanking me. I was given postcards, chocolates, passes to concerts, and Jay, the rich kid in our class, just gave me money. He said that now I could buy a normal phone. It was great to be popular with a new phone. And Jay came up to me after school and offered me some kind of business. I would do all the tasks for him, and he paid me. And he named a good sum. I thought about it and agreed. This, of course, was not very fair, but knowledge was the main thing, so I would benefit from it. My business started to thrive. I did 5 or 6 homeworks a day, and I was already thinking about how I would spend the money, but Dad was getting suspicious. I began to sit too long at other people's lessons, forgetting about my own. I was no longer the best student in my class, and I often answered at random in class or was silent. My father tried to find something out, but I told him that my love for school was no longer mutual. So a month passed. I was tired, to be honest, but money was more important. Emmy told me that I looked terrible, but I didn't care. Suddenly, at school, my father called me into his office. I thought like a teacher, but it turned out that no. He shoved all the works I did for others under my nose. It turned out that he did a real investigation. He even went through my things. And this was my dad, who had said many times that another person's property was infallible. Tell me, do your parents also break the rules that they themselves make up? And then Dad talked to Jay. At first, he tried to protect me, but as soon as they promised him that I would get the punishment and not him, he informed my father that I had been doing homework for him for a month. Traitor! My father took me home from school and told me for a long time how bad I was, how I prevented my classmates from getting valuable knowledge for money, and how I was a disgrace to my family. Then, everything was terrible. My father took my phone and put me under house arrest until I could fix my grades. I tried to resist, started a row. In the end, he took me by the scruff of the neck and forced me into the room. This was my dad who said that any conflict should be resolved peacefully, as if he was replaced. It was so creepy. I tried to justify myself, to explain something to him, but he wouldn't listen. He left, slamming the door. The next day, he drove me to school in complete silence. It was even worse at school. Jay told everyone that I was the daughter of our mathematician. Daddy didn't keep quiet either and told the teachers who I did my homework for. Can you imagine? Not only did my classmates find out that I was cheating on them, but they all got their grades lowered because of my father. It was lucky that nothing was entered in the personal file. I tried to cry to Emmy, but she turned away from me too. I no longer had a friend. None of my classmates spoke to me. Everyone tried to sit further away, and someone even put chewed gum in my backpack. But I wanted to help, and now I was being attacked from all sides, both my father and my classmates. I broke down and told my father what I thought, that he turned me into an outcast and that if he'd bought me a phone, nothing would have happened and then I was getting overwhelmed. I yelled that if my mother were alive, she wouldn't let me be bullied. I was crying, screaming, and he hugged me and suddenly began to apologize. He said that he was too strict with me because he was very afraid of losing me, that he wanted me to be honest with him. That went too far. And then he whispered that maybe my mother really wouldn't be happy that he was being so hard on me. He brought me up wrong, and it was all his fault and only his. But then I began to protest that no, I was also wrong, and he brought me up well. And let him live, please. So we had a long conversation with him. He wasn't sure what to do to fix it either. And in the end, we decided that I would go to another school. And he wouldn't be my teacher anymore, just my dad. Learning is learning, and we have no one else. Why do we need to quarrel? The new school is great. There are good guys here. I quickly made new friends. They sometimes tease me that I don't let anyone copy off of me. They think it's because I'm too correct. I'm the best student in my class again. We also have an amazing historian. He's taking an advanced course in American history, and he promised to take me next year. And my classmates say that I was very lucky with my dad. He's cool and lets me do a lot of things. Dad really began to allow me more, to ask what I want to buy, and stopped refusing something cool but useless. The cheating story is now our secret. Sometimes it is very difficult to understand your parents. It seems that they are either crazy or aliens, especially when they lose their temper. But the solution can be found. I'm very happy that my dad and I were able to do this.
It was the worst day of my life. Me, mom, and dad were in the courtroom. They were getting divorced. My mother sued my father for half of his money and found another man. How could she? The jury were whispering and pointing at dad. Yes, he's special. He has a rare disease. At the age of 13, he stopped growing, and he looks like a teenager all his life. They should be ashamed. To forget this nightmare, we moved. Dad, despite the fact that mother sued half of the state, continued to successfully run his business. He's awesome. I went to a private school with an emphasis on literature, and of course, on the first day, the local teacher confused my father with a schoolboy. She yelled at us like we were skipping school. The next day, my dad decided to please me. It was almost Christmas, and he brought gorgeous Christmas tree with beautiful decorations and garlands to the school hall. It looked like a jewelry boutique on the tree. When that teacher, Amber, saw dad with the tree, she immediately understood everything. She started to apologize for that yesterday's confuse. Well, of course, my kind dad made a joke of it and continued to chat with her sweetly. My dad just doesn't hold a grudge. Lucky for you, Amber. Christmas dinner was coming up and dad called the guests, though didn't say whom. I decided to show off and prepared my signature dish, a ham. The evening promised to be fabulous, but I definitely didn't expect such guests. Amber was standing in front of me with a festive ham in her hands. Is this a joke? When did she and dad get so close? I wanted to please dad with my signature ham, but he tried her dish first and even praised it. The evening was ruined. But gifts always lifted my spirits. By the fireplace, my dad handed me an expensive Parker pen that I'd been dreaming about for a long time, but I didn't dare ask for it. Cool. And Amber, dad invited her to a concert. No way! It seems that it was going to be a real date. In the evening, dad went to this concert and didn't return home at night. Did he really stay with Amber? In the early morning, dad showed up as if nothing had happened and took me to school. Amber was waiting for us in the school parking, and then I saw her, returning dad's watch. Everything was confirmed. I sadly trudged to class. When I came in, everyone was giggling, and there was a drawing of dad and Amber all over the blackboard, and it had inscriptions saying teachers in love with a youngster, so the whole school knew about it. Because of meetings with the teacher and workload, dad spent very little time with me. And finally came our special day with dad. We usually go to the mall, watch movies, shop, and have fun. Just him and I. We went to another boutique. I picked up a bunch of clothes and went to the fitting room. But when I came out, dad wasn't there. I was really scared. But a few minutes later, he returned with the kitten in his arms. I couldn't even dream of this. But of course, the gift wasn't for me. We took Fuzzy to Amber's. I was starting to hate her. I tried to tell my father that they weren't a couple, but he wouldn't listen. Amber this, Amber that. She got into her family and no one even asked me because she's perfect. No one's perfect. She opened the door all dressed up. And from her conversation with dad, I realized that they were going to a restaurant. Yeah, now I know why she's dressed up like this. I pretended to be a nice girl and offered to babysit the cat while they were at a restaurant, although I had other plans. As soon as the door closed behind them, I decided to look around. But then Fluffy began to pitifully meow. Apparently it was hungry. I decided to feed it and opened the cupboard to get food, but instead, I found a box. It was a bunch of dad's notices. Wow, our Miss Perfect was drowning in dads. I turned on Sherlock mode and went to her bedroom. There was a laptop next to her bed. I can definitely find something interesting there. Bingo! There was our sweet Amber's messages to a friend saying she really needed money. What's this? Is this a link to dad's company's website? Here you are. I heard the sound of an approaching car outside the window, but when the door opened, all I saw was Amber. Dad was called to another emergency meeting. I don't know who was more upset, me or the teacher. To give Amber her due, she played her part well, even offering to give me a ride home. She never stopped talking during the ride, and in the end, she suddenly gave out that she loved my dad. What kind of a liar was she? I told her what I thought and ran away. I was so disgusted. I tossed and turned all night, and I don't even remember when I fell asleep. In the morning, I was woken up by the smell of fresh pancakes. I ran to the kitchen without even changing my pajamas. I haven't seen my dad this happy in a long time. When I asked what time he came back, it turned out that he hadn't spent the night at home again. He was out with Amber all night. And then I exploded. I told him that she only wanted money from him. I wanted to tell him about the debts and loans, but he abruptly cut me off. It was the first time I'd seen my father so angry. He said that he understood that I decided to come up with some hooey about Amber out of jealousy, and sternly added that I better not get involved in adult matters that I don't understand yet. I couldn't hold back my tears. But Dad, what about... He came up to his senses and began to speak more softly, but I didn't back down. I kept saying she was trying to trick him. I had just started talking about the messages when Dad said that Amber and I needed to get to know each other, and we were all going to paintball together. Well, perfect. We ran into Amber's ex on the paintball field. You should have seen her face at that moment. Her ex began to bully my dad, calling him a baby and child. How dare he? Amber immediately answered him and he blushed and left. For a second, I even respected her, but only for a second. I've seen all the evidence. And I shot Amber, but I accidentally hit her in the head. I didn't want it, but she immediately left, saying that she had to teach someone extra classes. We didn't play anymore because Dad was in a bad mood. I felt guilty and tried to apologize, but he interrupted me and said that I had disappointed him. It hurt me. The next day I came to school in a bad mood, but my stupid classmates jumped on me right from the doorway. Like I got an A in literature because I'm now the teacher's favorite. Were they even serious? I couldn't bear it and ran away into the hall. Someone was yelling in the principal's office. I overheard, and I think the principal was scolding Amber for the rumors that were going around about her. A minute later, Amber came out crying. Yeah, I wasn't the only one who got sick of it. She came over and offered a truce for my father, at least for a week. The thing was that Dad had a birthday in a week, and Amber wanted to throw a surprise at her house that Dad and I were supposed to attend. I didn't want to put up with her, but it was a great chance to establish a relationship with Dad and show him the messages, so I agreed. On the eve of his birthday, I prepared a special gift for my father. A poem. Dad kind of thought out a little, and when I said I also wanted to apologize to Amber for that shot, he was really happy. It was a big surprise. Amber had all Dad's colleagues and friends in the house. When did she get to know them? While everyone was hanging out, I slipped away to look for a laptop with a cherished chat. I just found it and was about to leave when I bumped into Amber at the door. She saw the laptop in my hands and immediately started clucking. Like you can't break into someone else's room like that. Blah blah. Did you have the right to break into my life? Dad came running at the noise, barely restraining my joy. I showed him the chat. See, Dad, I told you, all she wants from you is money. You should have seen the teacher's face. She blushed, confessed her debts and loans, and said she didn't want to involve him in her problems. She can handle everything on her own. Yes, of course. Sure, we believed you. But my father said he believed her. He closed the laptop without even looking at the chat and explained that Amber was in a difficult situation. Again, that dry tone, as if we were strangers. I couldn't stand it any longer and ran away. I hate Amber. Even at home, I couldn't hide from this snake. Dad used their picture as a wallpaper on his laptop. I had to do something. And then I got an idea. It may be cruel, but I decided to leak a photo of Dad and Amber kissing in the internet from an anonymous account. Let everyone think that the teacher seduced the student. I think neither the school nor the authorities will be happy about this. And Amber will get punished. Yes, Dad, I used your illness, but it's for your own good. I'm sorry. In the morning, I was wildly embarrassed and left for school early. There was a chaos. The photos spread all over the city. Journalists and police arrived. Was she really going to jail? Suddenly, Dad appeared. When he saw the crowd, he asked what was the matter. A minute later, the police were escorting Amber out. She looked very confused and I couldn't look her in the eye. Dad still didn't understand what had happened. While we were waiting for Amber at the station, my shocked dad was reading an article on the internet where there was a photo of him and Amber with a headline, "Photo of a teacher kissing a teenager turned out to be fake." He couldn't understand who could have done such a cruel thing to him, and I was embarrassedly silent. Soon, Amber was released. The cop asked her if she would file a libel complaint, but she refused. She knew I was behind it, though. I was afraid that she would tell father, but all Amber told Dad was that they needed to break up, and then she quickly left. After that, Dad called her and even came to her place, but she ignored him. Dad got depressed and was all because of me. Did he really fall in love with her? I brought up the chat theme once again, and then I found out the truth. It turns out that Amber didn't need the money. She wrote about her mother, who needed an expensive surgery, and she had already gotten loans when Amber and Dad got together. father, so it turns out that her feelings were sincere. I tried to find Amber at school to apologize, but the scandal was so big that she was fired. I steeled myself to tell my dad the truth. I was the one who did it, and I was the one who made Amber leave Dad. I'd never spoken so sincerely in my life as I did at that moment. Dad was in shock, but most importantly, he forgave me. He immediately called Amber, and we found out that she was going to fly to Seattle. Her flight was today, and we rushed to the airport. There were only 5 minutes left before the boarding was over. But we made it! Amber heard me and Dad calling her name. She dropped her tickets and ran into Dad's arms. And then without a word, they hugged me. And then I realized that she wasn't my enemy, and my desire to protect my dad was actually jealousy. We've been living together ever since. Amber and I had a lot in common. For example, love for cats, hams, and of course, for Dad. Quite a nice set, isn't it, Fuzzy?
How stunning you are. I never dreamed that my first kiss would be with such a beauty. God, Nancy, you're incredible. But just as I reached out to hug Nancy, the image was gone. Heck, I angrily pulled off my VR glasses and... Mom, what have you done? Mom was standing there with the cord sheet unplugged. And what was this supposed to mean? In an icy tone, Mom had told me to go to dinner. I clenched my fists, hiding my annoyance, and started down the stairs to the kitchen. Even though I was angry, I didn't want to show it. It was already hard for her. When I was 6, my dad left us and our world turned into hell. Mom could not even find the strength to cook. Once, when I brought Mom dinner, I noticed that she was not breathing. I was so scared and ran to her, but I tripped over an empty bottle. There were a dozen of them here. It turned out that Mom was drunk. God, it was so scary. I was there all night. When she woke up, she whispered that she didn't want to live. Everything inside me collapsed. Through my tears, I promised that I would never leave her alone. She smiled sadly, and said that my dad had said the same thing, and then betrayed her. I felt the fire of hatred burning inside me. I would never be like him. When I met my soulmate, I would surround her with love. To always be close to my mom, I switched to homeschooling. Only Mom didn't feel any better. But one day, everything changed. One day at dinner, Mom confusedly said that she had plans for the evening. I got wary. I'm going on a date, she said suddenly. I was like, what? This was great. The main thing was that this man was worthy of her. Suddenly, Mom said that she had another piece of news. She handed me a gift wrap package, but what was it? I quickly unpacked and... Come on, a virtual reality kit? I dreamed of such a thing, but we didn't have the money to buy it. I looked at my mother questioningly, hesitantly. She said it was from my dad. So I froze. He had been gone for 15 years. Why did he suddenly show up? Mom's face flushed and she quickly left. Still at a loss, I installed the console, and there was a download window. Wow, there was an installed game here? Real life? I clicked on it uncertainly and put on my glasses, and I immediately plunged into a new world. I created my character. He was taller than me and more beefed out. Also with a beard. Yes, in real life, I could only dream of such a look. I went to explore the city. While I was looking around, a guy came up to me. I cringed inwardly. I was used to such meetings in ordinary life ending badly. But the guy smiled at me and said it looked like I was new, and he offered to show the city. Tempting, but I had other goals. So I thanked the guy and told him I wasn't here to hang out. I wanted to learn how to build relationships with girls. After all, this game was my chance to learn how to behave with the opposite sex. And when I learned, I could build a strong relationship in my life. I turned off the console, and I heard the lock click. Mom came back so late? She looked pleased. I immediately rushed to tell her about the game, and Mom said that I should call my father. No way though. The next morning, I immediately reached for the console. I couldn't wait to plunge back into a perfect world. I was hoping that this time I could meet a girl there. I started the game. I had a very good feeling about this. I found myself on a familiar street in the city and suddenly saw her. She was riding a skateboard, and I realized that she was the one. There was not a second to lose, and then I rushed to catch up with a beautiful stranger. She slowed down, turned around, and abruptly asked why I was following her. I was confused. Normally, I would have mumbled something unintelligible. But hell, I could be whatever I wanted here. So I blurted out that I fell in love at first sight. My heart was pounding out of my chest. She would tell me where to get off, but the girl smiled and said I was cute. Then she introduced herself as Nancy. I couldn't believe it. She didn't turn me down. Nancy called me for a walk. On the way, we got to talking. She asked a lot about my childhood, about my parents, but when I told her about my dad, she asked in a puzzled way if it was really true that he had not showed up all this time. This couldn't be happening. It could, Nancy. You just don't know what it's like to know that your dad does not care about you. Suddenly, Nancy stopped abruptly and said that she seems to have some problems with the internet. Her character disappeared into thin air. I spent the next day playing the game again. But Nancy did not show up. And just when I thought I'd never see her again, she called out to me. We skateboarded together for hours. She was so awesome, but our tastes didn't always agree. Hers were somewhat, old-fashioned, but she was constantly making excuses, repeating that she had no friends of her own age at all. It was hard to believe. Nancy had to be the coolest girl in school. All my days now passed with only one thought: how to quickly immerse myself into the game. I was ashamed to admit, but I wasn't even interested in how Mom was doing. Although judging by her happy appearance, everything was great with the new boyfriend. In the evening, when Mom and I were having dinner, her phone rang. Mom picked up the phone and suddenly turned pale. What happened? In tears, my mom said that my dad had been in an accident. What was going on? Mom started packing quickly. I didn't understand why she was making such a fuss. Dad would never have gone to help you. But Mom said sharply that I was being unfair. As a real son, I should also go with her. No way. I was so angry. When I got my breath back a little, I felt that deep down I was really worried about my dad. Maybe I shouldn't have reacted so harshly to my mom's words. I didn't know what to do, and then I decided to go into the game. Nancy understood me so well, she would definitely give a good advice. I quickly put on my glasses and turned on the console, but Nancy was nowhere to be found. I sent her a request to join, but she didn't respond. Panic gripped me. I suddenly felt alone. Mom was all about a new boy, and the girl I loved didn't even get in touch. I pulled off my glasses. Why did I even think she felt the same way about me? It was a game. And who knew how she was like in real life? I threw my glasses on the floor angrily. For the next few days, I stayed in the game as I searched the entire virtual city for Nancy. Did she become uninterested in me and would never see each other again? But soon, when I was riding my bike, I received a notification on my phone. Nancy? She called me to the game. It was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. I immediately rushed home, put on my glasses, and immediately saw Nancy. She asked me not to ask her anything she would tell me. Good. Then let's go for a ride. Nancy nodded and loaded the bike into the game. What about your skates? Nancy was confused, but said that she had decided to try something new. It was kind of weird. And during the walk, I was convinced that Nancy wasn't like my Nancy. We talked about movies and games all the time. She was not as old-fashioned as I thought she was. I felt like we were on the same page. And at the moment we almost kissed, Mom came into the room and turned off the console. I was very angry. But my mom looked worried. God, was something wrong with my dad? Mom replied that he was being discharged from the hospital today, which means we should visit him, she said suddenly. Should we? Mom hugged me. We are not all eternal, and there is nothing worse than realizing that you have not had the time to forgive someone who was really dear to you. These words hooked me. I decided to go to my dad, to his new family. I got to his house and I saw him. So that's why I have blue eyes and a square chin. My dad's new wife's at the table. She was so nice to me. And Dad seemed genuinely interested in everything. He was a monster in my imagination, but the man I saw before me now was a real good-natured man. Then a girl bursted into the kitchen. It turned out to be their adopted daughter, Shai. Surprisingly, she had so relieved the situation. It was as easy as if we'd known each other for 1,000 years. After dinner, she volunteered to show me the house. We went into her room and then I saw the same console as mine. Wow, it turned out that she also played real life. Wow, see you in the game tonight. I came home in high spirits. I couldn't wait to play with Shai. And I didn't want to tell Nancy about her in case she took offense. I put on my glasses and started the game. Time passed, but she did not come. Maybe she had problems with the internet. Suddenly I noticed some silhouette. Finally. But it was Nancy. She came over and said, "Well, hi. How did you get home?" Shai? So it was you? An amazing coincidence, but Shai looked very confused. She said it didn't really seem like a coincidence because when she turned on the console, a character had already been created there, and she just went in out of curiosity. And so she met me. She said that she was surprised when I called her Nancy, but decided to continue pretending that we really knew each other. Stop, so Shai had only been in the game for a week? And who played for Nancy all this time? Shai kept saying that she didn't have any guesses at all. Suddenly she screamed and abruptly disconnected. Where are you going? An hour later, there was a knock on our door. Maybe it was my mom's new boyfriend. I ran downstairs, eager to meet him. But Shai was standing in the doorway with my dad. I didn't understand anything. Here, meet the real Nancy, Shai said with a chuckle. What was going on? Was this a joke? Dad said that he tried his best to make contact with me, but never got a chance. What did he mean? He could just come. Suddenly, he said that he wanted to see me, but Mom forbade him. He added that he always passed gifts with notes, hoping that I would get in touch with him. What are you talking about, Dad? Then I noticed my mom. She heard everything. Mom looked down and said that she was very ashamed. I didn't understand anything. So, was it true? Mom nodded. She replied that for a long time, her resentment against my dad was so great that she did not notice anything. She actually gave all the gifts to the orphanage, but her new man convinced her that she could establish a connection between her son and his father. And who is your new man? The teacher from the orphanage, Mom said with a smile. She met him when I was handing over Dad's presents, but now she realized how important this relationship was, for me and for my dad. And she was so ashamed that she let her pride overshadow the voice of her heart. I threw myself into my dad's arms. Mom and Shai hugged us too. Well, real life, though more complex and confusing, is much more interesting than any game. Did you like this video? Then subscribe and like it. Support the channel, folks. Thank you so much.
This college canteen is mind-blowing. I filled a whole tray of food and turned to leave, but immediately bumped into someone. No way! Judy Harrison! She's the one who put my father in jail. The plates crashed to the floor. It all started that morning when my mom decided to drop me off for my first class at college. We were on our way and suddenly Dad's favorite song started playing. I was so sad that he wasn't with us right now. I offered to visit him, but Mom was against it, said that she hadn't forgiven him yet. Are you serious? There's nothing to forgive. Mom was always too hard on my father. Out of resentment, I stamped the car door and walked to college. I thought about how my mother often didn't understand me. My dad shared all my hobbies, including my love for technology. He's the only reason I got into this college. But for 3 years, Dad has been rotting in prison for nothing. And all because of this Judy Harrison. She accused my father of molesting her. Dad denied everything. Of course, he couldn't do that. She just set him up, but the jury didn't believe him. But they believed Judy's tear-stained face. And now my dad will spend 10 years behind bars. How can I accept this? All these years, I've longed for justice. So I was standing in front of Judy in the college cafeteria. The shock made the words stick in my throat. And I shout out into the hall. Charlie, my friend, caught up with me. I told him everything, barely able to contain my anger. I was angry with myself for not telling Harrison everything right away, but then I realized it was for the best. I don't think she recognized me. This was my chance to get Judy to tell the truth to the police. By the end of the day in college, I had a plan in mind getting this Judy out. First, Charlie would hit on her and gain her trust, and then lure her to a secluded place. There she would tell the whole truth. An abandoned construction site nearby was perfect for this. Charlie refused, so I had to push him. Well, his strict mother still didn't know how bikers stole his money, or whose cigarettes she found under the sofa. I had to cover for Charlie all the time. What did he do for me? After these arguments, Charlie gave up. The game started. We agreed that he would try to get Judy to talk. He would sit down and ask for help with his homework. I needed him to pick her up and ask her out. However, Harrison only explained the tasks to him and then ran away under any pretext. So, I told Charlie to change his tactics, to tell her more personal stories to ingratiate himself with her, and it worked. They gradually grew closer, but Judy did not agree to dates. We had to take a risk. Charlie climbed up to her on the 4th floor with a huge bouquet and begged her to give him a chance. Otherwise, he would jump. At this point, Harrison could not resist and agreed to go with Charlie to the construction site to watch the sunset. Yes! For 2 months, while Charlie was getting close to Judy, I worked through every point of the plan and completely gave up on studying. In parallel, I collected the necessary props for the abandoned construction. I bought a second-hand loudspeaker, printed out photos from the investigation, and made a real prison out of the abandoned building. It took a lot of time to install speakers and cameras all over the construction site. My dad taught me how to deal with technology. I called Charlie the day before, and we discussed all the details. And he said he'd be there if anything happened. I could have sworn that Judy Harrison would remember this date for the rest of her life. When they came, I was already in the excavator's cab, where my laptop was receiving images from every camera on the construction site. I could direct the entire show. Pale Charlie ushered Judy in, locked the door, and disappeared. "Charlie, what's going on?" was all she could say. "Ha, now you'll find out." I gave her instructions over the loudspeaker in the warder's distorted voice while I watched her from the control room. "Judy Harrison, the truth hall is waiting for you." She jumped up in surprise. Harrison lunged for the iron door, but it was locked. She backed away from the passageway and ran down the hall. Judy looked around in confusion. Photos of eaten prisoners were plastered on the walls, and terrible screams were coming from the speakers. In parallel, I conducted an interrogation about the events of that evening. She didn't answer me, just staggered on in silence, a grimace of fear on her face. So, she reached the climax. Prison. It was a decorated room with skulls where a wooden box stood alone in the center. "You have been found guilty of libel against Henry Chapman," I concluded, "and you will be punished as you deserve. Come to the box now." Then the gate behind her slammed shut, and the room filled with blood-red light. Harrison turned pale. "Please let me out," she screamed. "I'm claustrophobic." I was silent for a few minutes while Harrison howled. Finally, she went to the box and took out a prison uniform with her tag on it. "You take the rap. 10 years. By this time, I had come down from my hiding place and out to Judy. "I'm Henry Chapman's daughter, and you lied about his good name, and now you're not leaving here until you agreed to tell the police." Harrison suddenly began to choke. She turned white and fainted. It couldn't be worse. I was furious, but I didn't want her to check out here. I had to help her up and literally drag her out into the hall. Suddenly, with a deft movement, she snatched the radio from me and pushed me aside with all her strength. I just caught a glimpse of Judy pulling the lever with a sly smile. A huge ball on a chain whizzed past me and knocked down the walls. The floor broke and I fell down somewhere. What kind of joke is this? I landed on soft backs and there was a rustling and squeaking sound around me. Oh God, rats! It was useless to call for help. Charlie was in the other wing. Then I heard Harrison yell that she knew everything. Judy knew our plan from somewhere. Now it's my turn to do the quest. She hissed sarcastically. What a stinker. How did I fall for her tricks? Imagine coming back from a party with your brother. Harrison whispered ominously. You must be thinking, which brother am I talking about? You don't have one. But I have. More precisely, what's left of it. Harrison's voice broke and I felt uneasy. So it's late evening. You two go together. And then the car crashes at us. Suddenly, I was blinded by a bright flash. The spotlight hit me right in the face. A drunk driver hits your brother at full speed. Fred was in intensive care. Doctors fought for his life for several days. And then they said that he would always be disabled. My brother had to forget about his career as an athlete. Judy said with pain. I want to show you something. Harrison approached me and handed me the photo. It showed the black Jeep with the license plate ABC 4530. Oh my God! Dad, I could not resist and began to cry. The police didn't believe me. Harrison continued. He got out of it. He found people who allegedly saw his car in another place and the photo was recognized as fake. Then I decided to sort it out myself. She took a picture of Dad while he was alone and made some dirt out of it. This time, cops believed her because she managed to think it all out. Time seemed to have stopped. Harrison didn't say anything, but I just stood there, clutching the photo. You're lying. I screamed and lunged for her. It was going to be a fight, but Charlie came running and pulled me away. It turned out that he had long suspected something was wrong, but could not get through the rebel. He asked me to calm down. The hell with it. This hypocrite didn't dare slander my father. Harrison stared at me, then turned and left without a word. I didn't expect this. I went to jail right after that damn construction site. I told my dad what I had heard, word for word, and waited with bated breath for his answer. Come on, tell me. But he was silent, his head bowed. So it happened like this. My vision went dark. I was hoping that my father would refute everything, but all he said was that it was a difficult period in his life. How could he deceive me? I don't remember how I left or how long I wandered the streets. I hated everyone, deciding not to go home. I went to the construction site and stayed there until nightfall. That's where she found me, Judy. She said she was just trying to get justice. Of course, I returned the favor. I felt sorry for her brother, but I didn't know how to help. After the conversation, we both felt better. The next day, I looked for Charlie. However, in college, I immediately got to the principal. It turned out that I failed the test, and at this rate, I could lose the scholarship. I was so ashamed that with this stupid revenge, I completely gave up on my studies. I also felt guilty about Charlie. I noticed that he liked Harrison, but he was literally torn between us. Well, I told him, since Judy and I had made up, I didn't mind him hitting on her. I realized how important it was to be able to forgive, especially if you were loved. Yes, it's not easy for me to accept my father's lies, but I have to meet him again and try to make things right. And I need to explain everything to my mother. Maybe now she can forgive him. After all, he only has us now.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm 16 years old, and I listened to everything my father said. How do you let your parents know that you've already grown up? Watch this video to the end, and you'll find out how obeying my father ruined my life, and what happened when I went against his will. My dad is my family, and we really love each other. My dad always protected me from the dangers of this world, so I couldn't wear makeup, eat junk food, or communicate with boys. I love my father, so I did everything he said. He also wanted me to grow up to be a great runner, but to be honest, no matter how hard I tried, I never got to love running. I love to draw. I would like to become an artist one day, but he said that this kind of thing is not serious. Despite this, I was secretly preparing for the exam for the drawing course. I had 2 months to prepare. We had a running marathon in our city. Of course, I participated, and before the start, I met Paul. We even managed to talk a little. Paul said that he was going to a cool camp where he would be on a running team, and there was also a team of artists, and everyone communicated well with each other. I was really excited to go there. Of course, when my dad saw me and Paul, he was very upset, and he even gave me a scolding in front of everyone for my own good. Does your parent punish you in public? I was very sad that I had upset my dad, and yet I kept dreaming about the camp. It was quite confusing. My running was so-so, in the style of a pregnant turtle, as my dad joked. He didn't joke when we got home. I had really disappointed him. He wanted me to train even more, and I wanted to please my dad with more intensive running courses, but then it meant that all my preparation for the drawing exams would be postponed. It was a pity, but my dad's wish was more important. When my dad calmed down, I decided to float the idea of the camp, just in case I would get lucky. Of course, it was all in vain. My dad said I wouldn't go anywhere without him, that I needed to think about the failed marathon, not about entertainment. In the late afternoon, I got a call from Paul. We chatted about the marathon, and then he suddenly asked if I wanted to meet him. Did his parents allow him to go out like that? Of course, I said that I wanted, but my dad wouldn't let me leave the house. So I called Paul to our place. I wanted to let Dad see that Paul was a good guy, that he was a serious runner, and maybe he would let us be friends after that. But Dad didn't like Paul. He kicked Paul right out at the doorstep and locked me in my room. He yelled that he didn't raise me like this, that I was a disgrace to him. Pushing me into the room, my dad saw my drawings. He asked, "What the hell is that?" I I was afraid that he would tear them up, so I said that it was my classmate who gifted me her works. He demanded me to stop communicating with a girl who spent her life with nonsense. I kept telling myself that Dad wanted the best for me, but to be honest, I believed it less and less. Was it really out of love for me that Dad made things this way? That I didn't have any friends? Said that dates and fancy clothes, movies and cafes were scary? That he had to protect me from them with all his strength? Was becoming a great runner the only way to survive this life? I didn't know the answers. I was scared and hurt. In the evening, Dad's friends who were athletes came to see him. Dad used to be a candidate for the Olympic team. He was predicted almost the world championship. Then he got an injury and had to leave sports for good. So maybe he thought that if he hadn't managed to do it, then I could, but I didn't want it for myself. Dad asked me to come to see the guests and began to brag about my awesome running, but his friends made fun of my victory. It turned out that their children were much cooler than me. I wasn't a bit offended because they all said that the real training was in the camp, and then they began to argue about which camp was better. Dad listened to them and nodded. Thus, I finally got to go to the camp. I was ready to hug all of those grumblers. And the next day, I finally realized what Dad's love was worth. I got in a cramp in my leg during training. I told the coach about it. He said I was looking for reasons not to run. When my dad came to pick me up, the coach told that to him too. I thought my dad would take my side. He knew what it was like to get cramps on a running track, but he kept nodding and nodding. He didn't even listen to me. He said I was lazy, and I didn't love him because I didn't do what he said, and that the coach is always right because he's older. Dad sent me to the camp anyways. Of course, provided that I would call him at least 3 times a day, that I'd only talk to girl runners, and that I'd be a good girl. Still, it was a breath of freedom for me. I didn't get along with the other guys very well, though. They thought I was weird because I followed my dad's instructions. Do your parents try to control every step you make too? It was sad that Dylan considered me weird too. He was the most handsome guy among the artists. I met him in the camp, and I was really scared that someone would tell my dad about it. Dylan and I even had dinner at the same table a couple of times. I did everything I could to make him like me. When he said that he liked girls with their hair down, I immediately removed the elastic band from my hair. And when he said that he didn't like the color green, I put my green t-shirt in the far corner of my suitcase. And finally, Dylan asked me out on a real date. We walked through the forest hand in hand. It was magical. And then we went out to the lake. And Dylan asked if I wanted to go for a swim. I didn't want to because the water seemed cold. But if Dylan offered and I refused, would I hurt him? Would that show him I didn't like him? But if I agreed, I would have to get in the water, and then Dylan would know that I don't like swimming, and then he would be offended. It was so difficult. I was completely lost. I said it was very late and ran off to the camp like a fool. I thought Dylan wouldn't even talk to me after that, but the next day, he invited me to a picnic. Everything was going great. Dylan told funny stories and I laughed. But then he poured me a full glass of vegetable juice. I can't stand vegetable juice, but once Dylan poured the juice, I took a deep breath like I was about to take a bitter medicine and took a sip. Still, I couldn't help grimacing. Dylan noticed it. He said that if I didn't like vegetable juice, I didn't have to drink it. Dad also said, if you don't like running, don't run. Grow up to be a drug addict and become a useless member of society. I said I loved vegetable juice and took another sip. Dylan sighed and said I probably didn't trust him if I couldn't be honest about something as simple as juice. I felt sad and warm at the same time. Could I really trust Dylan? At that moment, I just burst out and told him everything. I told him about my father, about art classes, and about the damn race. Dylan just listened in silence and patted my head. When I finished, Dylan had tears in his eyes. He whispered to me that the way I lived was unbearable, and if he needed to save me from my father, he knew the phone number of a shelter for escapees from abuse. I said I wouldn't leave my dad alone, and Dylan made me promise to look into my relationship with Dad. Then Dylan looked at my drawings and said that I should definitely go to study to be an artist. Oh my god! It was only then that I realized what was wrong with my family. I didn't even know that other people could choose what to eat or drink, when to swim, what music to listen to. The next day, my dad arrived at the camp. He was furious. Someone had told him about Dylan and me. He grabbed me by the hand and told me that everyone should know that his daughter's a flirt. After talking to Dylan, I was ready to have a serious conversation with my dad, but not for a public execution. I followed my dad out of habit, but then I thought, what the hell? I stopped and told my dad firmly that I would only talk to him in private, and that he will listen to me. My dad was surprised. His jaw dropped. He even stopped talking, and that's when I said it all, that I was not going to fulfill his childhood dreams, that I wanted to date Dylan, that I had talent for drawing and I would take art classes. I was scared, but I felt I was right. I think I went too far, though, because my dad turned purple. What was going to happen? Would he banish me from my home? Would he make me run until I died? But suddenly, my dad gave me a big hug. He said he'd gone too far, and perhaps that art was not a bad thing. And if I wanted to stop running, that was my decision and my right. Although, he did add that I would regret it. Wow, I could finally do it! Even if I regret it 100 times over. But for now, I don't have to regret it. I get a lot of praise in my art classes. Dylan likes the way I draw, and I will keep running in the morning for myself. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new interesting stories.